Alright, we're back in Substance Painter, and in the last video we took a look at how we could just drag in one of these materials into this slot up in here and just fill the entire object with that particular material. This will serve as the base for everything that will be underneath. So if we think about this cannon having layers, we're going to add other layers on top of this of materials and aging and dust and things like that. So we're going to try to keep this in some kind of logical order for how this would actually work in the real world as far as a base coat of material and maybe paint and things like that, and kind of how they stack on top of each other. So what we could do is just like what we have inside of Photoshop, we have folders for our layers, and I use that pretty much all the time in Photoshop. I think that works pretty well in Substance as well. So if you just go ahead and click here for a new folder, we can kind of be organized with this stuff. So we can call this our base, and then click and drag anything into that, and now it's within that area, and you can see you can turn it on and off. The other thing that it gives us the opportunity to do is we could actually put masks on this layer here, or we can mask out the entire folder and everything inside of it. So that becomes pretty powerful. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and take another material type, and we're going to go ahead and drag it in here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, drag down, and search for another material. So maybe we'll do something like this painted steel. So I'll go ahead and click and drag this thing out, and I can try to put it on top of this. We'll see if that works here like that. I actually threw it into the folder itself. So I'm trying to get it on top of that. I'm just going to click and drag out like that. So now you can see here is this painted steel. So each one of these materials actually has settings within it, so you can actually come over here into this area and you can change some of the properties on this. So like this right now is very kind of blue looking, so if I want to reduce the saturation on that, I can kind of drag this over in here and reduce the saturation on it, something like that. I'll go ahead and close that down. The other thing that you see is that we've got these different channels. So we've got color, height, rough, metal. This is our normal slot. You can open that up. You could click that if you wanted. It's already got some parameters for this material. The material doesn't use emissive either, but so that's why these are kind of turned off for this. But later we'll look at a fill layer, and then with a fill layer you can do anything you want with these different kind of channels. So within here we've also have things like parameters that have been set up for us. So this paint roughness, so if we wanted this to be more kind of metallic, shiny, we could drop this down and you can see we're getting more reflectivity. Or if we want it to be more matte, we could drag it this way like this, so it starts to feel more kind of like old or clay or something like that. So I think a good value for this is probably where it was at in the this default kind of range, right in through here. So then they also have this thing called rust on here, and we can click and drag that up, and you can see we're getting some of these kind of rust spots within here. So that's pretty cool. So navigation, if you know navigation in Maya, you know navigation in Substance Painter. If you hold down Alt and you left click and drag, you can rotate. Alt, middle mouse, you're going to pan. Alt and right click, you can zoom in and out. So again, I'm sure you're familiar with Maya and how you navigate inside of Maya. It'll be pretty easy for you to navigate inside of Substance Painter. So again, depending on how much of this rust that we want to kind of introduce onto here, we can dial this in and out like this. We could also open up these technical parameters. So there's also things like this contrast. Let's just see what happens when we kind of drag this up. So you can make it darker or lighter. Again, if you want to change these values numerically, you can just hit this little icon within here. And let's see, that was set to 0. Hue shift, so I guess you could push this towards another color like this. It looks like it's having a bigger effect on the actual rust itself, and it looks like in combination with that you could change the saturation of that within there. So I'll just put this back down to 0. Normal intensity, let's drag this up and see. So you can see it actually makes this kind of rough pattern a little bit different. And each one of these materials, you're going to see they're going to have different kind of settings within there. So you'll have to kind of play around with the values a little bit and kind of see what works for you. We can do height range, and we can see that is going to really push that up. So we could drop that back down somewhere within here, and then height position. doesn't really look like it's doing a whole lot there. So I think I'll just leave that at 0.5. So I think this works pretty well for this material here on this one. Let's see the saturation. Maybe that was up just a little bit more and through there, right in here. So I was trying to get some of that color for the rust back just slightly on this. Let me pull this up a little bit more. There we go. Now we're starting to get some color in there for sure. And I want to push it back to maybe where it was kind of that reddish kind of color right in through there. Okay, so now we've got this material sitting over the top of the material that we had before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make another folder. I'm going to throw the painted steel in that, and I'll call this painted steel, just like the one below. And what we can do now is we can come on here and we can add a black mask. And if we come and click and say add a black mask, black will mask out everything on here. Okay, so nothing's showing anymore. We could come in through here and we could actually paint white into this mask, and we could reveal different parts of it. But I'm going to show you how to use a generator, and a generator will kind of take a look at the edges of these things that was baked out with, if we go down here to our curvature map, and you were able to look at a curvature map, it's got black and white information, and it basically kind of shows you where the edges are, and it builds a masking system for that. So that's what it's kind of using for these generators. So I'll select that black mask, click here, and say add generator. And nothing happens because we haven't really selected anything. We can click in here and select from this list within here, or you can come over to generators, and if you like a generator like this metal edgeware, you can click and you can drag it onto here. It's got to be on that name. You can see it turns to a plus, and then it'll apply it there. So you could always get rid of it. You can get rid of it like that. And again, we can come here and you can select it in the same kind of area. So now you can see we've got this kind of really cool thing going on with our edges, but this is the inverse of what I would like. And on most of these generators, they do have an invert, so you can click the invert on there, and now you can see it feels like the edges of this have been worn away because they've been scraped or hit or things like that. So we've got a lot of wear and tear on this. If you see this wear level, you can drop that back. So we could kind of get something kind of more like this right in here. So now that you see these two things kind of playing together, you might want to go back to this slot right here, because this represents the mask that's going on with this, and this represents the material. You could go back here, and then maybe we go and change some of the parameters on here and maybe lighten this up just a little bit. It's up to you kind of what you're going for the look for that. And again, if we wanted to get back to the generator, we go back to the mask. As soon as I select that, if you see this little thing here kind of opens up, and you can see the generator on there. Now a lot of these things have these little eye icons, and you can turn the effect on or off, or you can turn the folder on or off. Just keep that in mind that you're able to do that as well. And we've also got a slider here for kind of like an overall opacity of this overall kind of effect that we've got going on here. So there's other opportunities within there to kind of play around with that as well. If we click on the name again, we can start to keep playing around with some of the values on here. So again, I think it's you would want to come through and you would want to try out some of these different options that you see within here for like the contrast and things like that, to try to get it basically to the kind of look that you're going for. Now there is this thing called use triplanar. So you can see I've got a UV border on here, and the seam kind of shows up a little bit on there. There have been cases where I see this use triplanar. This is just a way of it taking the map and blending it together. Right now it takes your UVs and it lays it out based off the UVs, but this triplanar uses projections from different angles and tries to kind of soften the transitions on those. So we can take a look and see if it kind of changes. It's not really kind of changing what I was hoping for in this area. So just kind of know that currently this isn't a purely like 3D procedural kind of noise kind of thing. It's actually being used with a map system. So you might you might see areas where there still might be some edges and things like that that are kind of showing up for that. We also have grunge amount like this, so you can see this is really kind of picking up these littler fine kind of details on here. Or I could drop that back if I don't want that. Or this grunge scale. Let's put this up a little bit more and see if this has a big effect on things. So you can see that this does play a part in some of that grunge kind of here. So I kind of like it larger and kind of pulled back a little bit right in through there. So it looks like you can also use your own custom grunge and through there. You can also have ambient occlusion masking. So if you look at the ambient occlusion and how it baked out, it basically where two edges meet each other, it kind of bakes out some darkening in there. So it looks like ambient occlusion masking is set to 0.5. We could pull that up a little bit and see if it's all the way set to 1. We've got this. If it's set to 0, we're getting something like that. So I think it was set to 0.5 on there. I'll just go ahead and leave that where it was at. So now we've got at least two different materials kind of going on in through here. Again, I still don't maybe like some of the roughness on here, so maybe I kind of pull this down a little bit more to kind of make it a little more reflective in through here, kind of like that. And so now we've got a pretty nice base kind of going on for what we're kind of painting here. All right, so there's a pretty good look at just dragging in some materials and filling with them and some of the folder structure things. Let's go ahead and look now at making our own custom fill layer. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder and just call this My Painted Steel, like this. And now we're going to go ahead and make a new fill layer. So let's go ahead and click this icon within here, and we'll go ahead and click and drag the layer right in here. And maybe I'll call this, I know I'm going to probably turn this into something that's red, so I'll call this red. And then now you can see with the fill layer, we have full access to the color, height, roughness, metal, normal, and emissive. And again, if you needed any additional information or any additional slots, you can go to the texture set area and you can click the plus and then add. You can see there's stuff for specularity and opacity, things like that. So that's where you would add that. Now, if you do want a transparent material, I do have to say that you have to change your material type. You'd go to the viewer settings and you would have to do something like PBR metal rough and then maybe something like this alpha blending. At that point you could make a new channel right in here that would be called opacity, and that would show up within here, and that's how you get transparency kind of going. So I don't really need that for this one. I know there's no transparency on it, so I'll just put this back on this PBR metal rough. And so now with this fill layer that we've got, you can come through at any point. And let's say I only wanted to work with color. I don't need any of these other channels, right? I could turn them all off by just selecting them off like that. And if I would need to turn anything back on, I could do that. But right now, let's just work with color. So I could change this and I could make this kind of this darker kind of red. And I don't want it super saturated, not super dark, maybe right around here in that kind of value range like that, right? So that's pretty cool. Now if I do height, I can say if this was paint and it was sitting on top of something else, how high up does it kind of sit? Now you won't see any kind of difference until we kind of hide some of this because we're filling the entire thing. But we'll just go ahead and put it in a value kind of right around there for now until we can kind of see what that looks like. If I want to control the roughness, I could turn that on, and then now I get a slider that lets me drag to the left and make it more shiny, or right and make it more matte. And so I think I'll try to be somewhere in this value range, right around there. We also could open up metal, and if we do metal, our metallic, right now it's not metallic, it's got a 0 value for that. But if we drag it all the way to the right, you can see how the material property of this changes based off of this value that we have here. I have noticed that Metallic obviously changed the specularity and kind of the reflectivity, things like that, but it also really drives up kind of contrast. And if you need something to be a bit darker, I have been playing around with metallic. I know that's probably not, as far as PBR standards, accurate or things like that, but I'm a little bit more concerned about how something looks. So if I need that, sometimes I kind of pull that to the right and make things a little bit darker at times. So I don't really want the metal. Again, if we were going to play with the normal map and do anything special with that, we could turn that on. And also, if we wanted this to be emissive, we could fill this with some kind of color like this, and you can see it has the appearance that it's self illuminating. So if you wanted to make this into like your own kind of lights or things like that, you could potentially do that. And again, while we have emissive on, if we go to the viewer settings and then we look at that emissive intensity, the default is set to 1 right around in here. So if we drag that all the way up to 10, it does have an effect on there, but we do have to kind of play around with this glare and maybe this luminance. We'd have to drive that up quite a bit. And if we take this threshold and kind of pull it down a little bit within there, that's kind of how you work with the emissive properties with inside of here. Again, it doesn't really correlate to what I see inside of UE4, so it's just kind of going to be an approximation for you for what you might see. So maybe I'll leave the values here like this, and I'll just turn emissive off and get that off of there. Okay, so now I've got my paint, and what I want to show you now is this. We've already looked at how to make sure that we get edge wear kind of going. So we can do that same thing with this layer here. We'll go ahead and make a black mask. We'll go ahead and put a generator on there. And then we will go ahead and select, again, the metal edgeware kind of generator, and we'll go ahead and we'll invert it like this. So now we've got something very similar to this thing down here, and it's completely overriding everything, which is fine. It's kind of what I want. We could kind of play around with this edge wear level. I'm going to drag that up quite a bit, make this a bit rougher, maybe right around in this area. Now we're starting to be able to see some of that height information that I was telling you about. So if we go back to this here and we look at height, this is what's controlling like how deep that thing actually is, right? So we just want it to stick up just a little bit. And if we need really fine values, again, we can click the little pin icon and type in value. So I'll do 0.02, or maybe 0.03 might be better, 0.03, something like that. So now it looks like we're set and we're pretty cool for things. I like this. Now I want to give myself the ability to paint in exactly where does this paint fall on the model. So I'll go ahead and select my folder group. And like I was saying, we've got a mask on here and there's a generator on that mask. But we can also take this folder and add a mask to that as well. So I'll add a black mask, and when I do that, it masks out everything. It's not going to let anything kind of come through. So if I want to paint into this, I can come over here to their brushes, and there's all kinds of really cool brushes to use. I'll just use their default soft right now. It's kind of like an airbrush kind of thing. And if I select any of these brushes, you can see each brush has got their own kind of settings for the brush itself, like its size, flow, which is pretty much opacity, and spacing. That's the little dobs of the paint, how close they are together on things like that. So you got angles for your brush, size, jitter. So a lot of the same kind of things that you would have like inside of Photoshop. You also have the hardness of your brush, which right now it's not hard at all. If I pull that all the way over, it'll harden up that brush here. That's why you can see there's a default hard and default soft, just variations of each other. Now here's something else. If you want to control the size with pen pressure, you can see you have to click here and say pen pressure, and if I wanted the flow to change with pen pressure, I could do that, or if I wanted to turn it off, I can say no pressure at all on there like that. So that will give me right now, my brush will be the same size and the pen pressure will just control how much flow or opacity will go through there. The other thing is, if we go down here, you can see this grayscale. This tells you what the brush is actually painting into. We're painting into a mask, so it's only going to be black or white. So you can see we've got black and we've got white. Right now it's painting white. Our mask is black. If we paint white into it, it's going to start to reveal that paint in that particular area like that. Now, just like Photoshop, if you tap X, or I'm sorry, yes, X, that's going to flip-flop this color that you see within here like this. So it's going to either go from full white or black. So at that point, it becomes like an erase whenever it's black like this. So I'll tap X, and we've got this here. So again, if we go back to the top of the brush, we've got size and flow. Now it is possible to actually use the controls within the keyboard, hotkeys, to kind of do this. So if we hold down Control and we left click and drag left and right, you can see it changes the flow of this thing, right? And we can make it really light, make it super heavy. And if we Control and right click and drag up and down, we can change the hardness value like this. Okay. And if we drag left and right while holding Control and right clicking, we can control the size of the brush. So that gives you all the control that you need just by holding on Control and left clicking. And if we drag left and right, this is flow. Actually, if you go up and down and drag, it's going to do the angle on there. And then Control right click left and right is going to give you the size, and Control right click up and down is going to control the hardness of the brush. So you got a lot of controls at your fingertip to kind of work with here. So I'm going to use the eraser tool just to get this off of here real quick like this, and I'll put it back on the paintbrush that we've got here. The other thing we got is we can paint with symmetry. So we can turn symmetry on like this here, and you can see this little drop down will let you say, do you want to paint with symmetry in the x-axis, y, or z-axis, and we would want to use the x-axis. And it's got this mirror plane, so it definitely lets you know that it's up. That gets a little annoying and can kind of get in the way. So if you want to hide that, you can click this hide symmetry plane. It will leave this red line like this, but at least visually you can paint and it won't kind of be a big deal for you. So I'm gonna make my brush size a little bit smaller, hold down Control, right click and move to the left, move it down a little bit like this, and I'm going to start painting on this thing here. And you can see, because we've got symmetry turned on, I'm going to be able to work around here like this. Now, because we already set up the generator on here, as we paint in, you see we got all that edge wear kind of going in, but now we can just kind of work our way around the model and just worry about painting on here. So you can see it's a little bit difficult to see on the underside of this. They do have this other mode of working where right now I'm in 3D only, but I can do 3D and 2D, and I can get a view like this, and I can see in 2D. So again, we can Alt left mouse, Alt right mouse like this to zoom in and zoom out. And then when you move the lighting around, Shift right click, you can see it updates in the two-dimensional view as well. So that can be kind of good for you to kind of move the lighting around and see how the lighting is reacting with things. So right now I'm painting on the bottom of the cannon right now. I did lay out my UVs, I would say, incorrectly, because if I paint on here in 3D, this looks correct. And it looks like I got some paint down here on the bottom, so I'll undo that real quick. It looks like in the 2D view, I'm actually painting on there a little bit. So let me fill that in that way. Okay, so if I fill this right here like this, I actually have my UVs probably backwards. I should have had this towards the front, and that would have made more sense. The other thing I can do is I can click and hold down Shift and then click again, and that will do a straight line for me. It's kind of similar to what Photoshop has. Now, Photoshop has that same kind of functionality, but that can be pretty nice if you want to build some straight lines that way. So I'm going to color those parts there. Maybe I'll go ahead and color, let's see, this part right here, like this, right here in that area. And maybe I'll paint these flaps as well. So let me move around and kind of find these. And so I could paint here and here like this. Just fill that in pretty easily. And let's take a look here. So I did get some on the base of this a little bit, and it's this plate right here. So I could tap X, and that would fill with black in here. So I can get rid of that. But I am having this thing where I'm starting to compete with this top part. So I'll just try to be maybe a bit more careful about this. I'll hold on Control and right click to get my brush size smaller, and then I'll just paint along through here. And I think that's working pretty good, just like that. Now, if you wanted to have something feel very specific for maybe some more of this edgeware, or maybe how the paint kind of falls in on this thing, what I could do is we could take our brush and we could make the size kind of small, make the brush harder like this, and then I would tap X, so I'm painting with black that you can see down there. And then now I could paint in here and say, yeah, I want to make this feel very specific for the corrosion on here. So again, I think it's pretty cool that the computer does a lot of this kind of edgeware kind of thing for you, but where you can make this really come to life is by using your artistic ability and kind of looking at things and making it exactly what it is that you want, right? So at that point, you get to kind of tell a story a little bit with what you're painting. So I'm going to go back to the 3D only view. I think I'm pretty good for that. And at times you might have to hold down Shift and right click and move your lighting direction around to kind of see things a little better. So I'm just kind of paint some of this away. So you can see I had this big kind of divot in there. So why not have the paint where it kind of follows some of that information that you see in through there, kind of like that. Maybe I don't want this to come in through that part here, or here like this, you know. And again, if we want this to be kind of specific on the different sides, we don't want to be painting with symmetry right now. So I didn't really kind of pick up on that, but I was kind of painting that away. So now I'll tap X and maybe fill some of this back in on this side and not have it match what was going on over there. So I'll do some of this like this and through here. And again, if you wanted to do some straight lines, let's turn symmetry back on and Control, right click and drag to make it larger. And I'll just click once here, hold down Shift and then click. And I can just fill in this part and be kind of careful about it. So click once, hold down Shift, and then let it form across there. It's almost like stretching a ruler out, and it fills the paint for you. So I'm going to move my light source, Shift right click like that. Just working my way around like this. So that's pretty quick to get some of that going. Then maybe I could do make this a little bit larger and do some information along here like this, like that. And I'll do this bottom part like this. Let me go back here. Let's move, actually I don't need to move the light source, so I'll click here and stretch across, and then do one here and stretch across like this. So I think this is a pretty good spot to make sure we are saving our work. Definitely want to make sure you do that. So go ahead, and I'm going to pause the video and go ahead and save. Just going to come up here to File and then do Save As, and that's where we're going to save to. I've already got a version of this, so I'm going to save this as a second version like this. And so then now we're ready to kind of keep working on here. So we've looked at so far how to use these different materials and kind of fill with that, creating our own kind of fill layer. The next thing we can look at is if we just added maybe our own, let's do another folder and just call My Paint like this. This time, instead of doing a fill layer, we'll just go ahead and do add a layer. And if we do that, we can click and drag that down in here like this, and I'll just call this My Paint like this. So this one's a bit different. You can paint with all the different channels and things like that. The only thing about this is that now at that point, let's say I put this on default hard or something like that. You can see now that I'm painting on My Paint layer, this is saying, do you want to change the color? Do you want to paint with some kind of color? Yeah, so if I want to paint with, let's say, a darker kind of red, like in through here, like this, I can do that. I can paint with height information, just like what we were doing before. I can set the roughness value on this and kind of make it, let's make it not so rough. Gives you a material kind of preview up here. Maybe I want it maybe a little bit more metallic, something like that. And then now, as I paint, I'm going to do this, where I'm going to turn on this is like their lazy mouse kind of feature, which if you can see this is kind of a radius for it, for how much it does for smoothing for the brush. It can do help you kind of average your strokes and do kind of nice kind of detailing, stuff like that. So if I click and I drag out, maybe I'm doing some kind of pattern like this or something, some kind of design, right? So we drew this thing out, just like what you see here, like what I did. Do something here. Now, the next time I paint, let's say I want to change the color of this or something and make this a bit darker, and maybe I want the roughness on this to be even less rough but more of this metallic kind of thing. I could do any of those changes, and if I wanted to even stick up even more, I could change the height value of this. Maybe this time I'll hold down control and right click and drag to the left, make it even smaller, and then maybe this time I'm kind of drawing, right? So each one of these strokes is going to be different, and it's stored in this paint layer, right? So each one of the strokes that you put down, depending on what the settings are completely different from each other. And you could even do something like, if I put this on emissive, I could change the color to red. I opened up the emissive channel. I can get rid of the metallic. Don't want any kind of roughness. I don't know. Maybe we'll pull that down a little bit like that. Okay. So then I'll give some red to this, to the emissive, and now this thing is going to feel like it's glowing at that point. It's kind of self-illuminating, right? So even if I put this in shadow, you can see how the emissive works. It feels like it's kind of like a light source of some sort, right? So this is how this works here. I'm going to go ahead and just trash this thing. I'll make a new one. We can go ahead and make a new paint layer. Maybe I'll call this symbol like this. And let's talk about pulling in a map into the program. So we need to prepare something and make sure we've got a map. So I'm inside of Photoshop and I just painted something that looks like this kind of quickly. The map size doesn't necessarily matter, but if you go and take a look at the image size, I'm just going to use a 1024 by 1024. And we could do that by making a file new and making sure we've got pixels 1024 by 1024 like that, and like this. And we can make a new document like that pretty easily. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this thing out. Let's say file, save as, and I got the class symbol. I'll go ahead and try, I'm not sure if we can load Photoshop. Let's try Photoshop. Class symbol.psd. Let's go back to Substance Painter, and then we can go File, and we can do Import Resources. So we can drag them directly into the shelf area. So let's see here. I want to get a texture, and let's see if I can go to the desktop real quick. And I want to basically find this, and I had my class symbol. Let me drag this over. Let me do this. Maybe medium icons. And I've got this class symbol.psd, and I'm going to click and drag it directly in here. Import for the current session only, or I could do import to project. I just want to do this current session only. I just want it for now, so I guess it won't actually save with the project. So now this becomes something that I can use, and what I could do is turn on stencil. So if I turn on stencil, I can click and drag this right in here to this area. And then now you can see I can position this thing. If I hold down S and if I right click, I can zoom in and out. If I just left click on here, I can rotate. So again, all holding down S and right click up and down will scale this thing up and down. S and then clicking with the left click will rotate around, and then S and middle mouse will pan this thing. So I'm going to try to get this thing right about here, like this. Again, we would have to kind of set things up where I wanted my color to be kind of this darker kind of red, not so saturated. Something like this in here. Height information, maybe about here. Roughness value, right about there. I don't want emissive turned on, and maybe it feels just a little bit metallic within there. And then now I can start to paint this thing within here. And I do have my symmetry turned on. Brush is kind of small. Control right click to increase that. I'll keep going on here. So I don't have to actually make that exact shape if I wanted to kind of use the shape to my advantage, but still make it feel like there's some kind of paint wear and stuff like that going on. I do have that opportunity to kind of do that, or we could just kind of go and try to fill in the whole kind of thing there based off the stencil. So I think that's working. That's working pretty good for us right there. Now if I hold on S and then kind of zoom up a little bit, I was just wondering if I could get this just a little bit larger. And I would really probably need to make like if I wanted to make an offset of this thing, I might be able to use this and kind of do a little bit of that work. Didn't mean to hit that, so I'll make this a little bit darker like this. Keep the roughness down, maybe something like that. And maybe if I did this outer part, I'm just seeing if I could build some kind of outer part. Let me hit undo real quick because I don't like the height of that. Maybe if I drop that down a little, this will sit a little bit lower than that other part and through there. So I could do something kind of like that. Make my brush size smaller just to make sure. Now I'll turn off this lazy mouse kind of feature thing that they got going on here. So you can see I'm trying to do two tones for this, and I'll move this down a little bit, maybe here for this area. Here. And to turn the stencil off, if we hold this down S you can see it's going to give you some of the controls for that. We can just come over here to stencil and hit X, and we can turn that part off like we've got there. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is start to build up some kind of dirt that's on here. Um, we can do something that feels kind of like oil or something like that. So let's go ahead and make a new folder, and we can call this oil like this. And I'm going to go ahead and use one of their materials that they have in here. And let's go ahead and find this steel rust and click and drag it into our folder that we just made like this, and you can see it's going to fill this entire area. So I think that one works pretty good, and it feels like it could be maybe kind of oily. The only thing is maybe we've got the roughness part, maybe it's too shiny. So maybe if we kind of did something like this and through here, I think maybe that will kind of work for us right there. So let's go ahead, and now we can mask this thing out with a black mask, and it's going to take everything away. Before we were painting with these different brushes, and you can see it's going to fill with either black or white. We already kind of looked at changing the brush types. We didn't change the shape of the alpha. That is a possibility for something that you could do. Based off of the texture, like just what we imported here. So you could do that. We didn't really necessarily look at that, but then we could also use a stencil, and the stencil is kind of turned off for this thing here. But they do have something in here called particle brushes, and they're actually very powerful and very cool. So we could do something. Let's try this heavy leaks, and we'll go ahead and put it on here, and you can see it's painting. It's going to do the particles, and it's going to paint with white. And so we're painting into that black mask, and if we just kind of click and drag on here, it kind of shoots particles onto the model, and it kind of follows the contour of the model and runs a simulation for some of this stuff. So it's actually pretty darn cool what it does. So I'm going to move my light source and then just shoot some particles up and through here, and kind of drag down and through there a bit. And you can see it kind of pulls down in the different cracks, things like that. Maybe if I shoot it right here at the top, where maybe these things would kind of pull up, you can see it kind of going down this way. Now, some other things that you can do with these particle brushes, if we go up into here, we could see that there's an area for the physics, and we can open that up, and we could maybe do something like this. There's like a global wind direction, so if you wanted to push it in a particular direction, so like Z, if I wanted to push it to where it's coming this way, I guess that's the positive Z, so let me do negative, and let's see if it pushes it back. Yeah, it kind of makes it flow this way, back like this. So that's something that we could do, and through here like this. So it's like coming down, but it's also kind of being pushed back all at the same time. And again, we're painting with white right now, so it reveals parts of that. If you tap X, it'll paint with the darker material, and so we could actually even kind of erase out with the particle brush, just like that. Maybe paint into here, kind of some stuff like this, and tap X again. This time I'll take the physics, and let's get that global wind direction. Do this and do negative Y for that, and they should kind of flow down and through here like this. I'm just going to streak down. Maybe I'll follow the top of this and have it come down and through there like that. I'll tap X to kind of erase some of that out. It's kind of neat, but here we go. I'm going to put a little on the top here and let some kind of run down there and do quite a bit. And then tap X and then erase out some here in this kind of area. tap X and add some and through here at the basin of this. Like that. Maybe make it feel as if stuff kind of dripped out of the cannon and kind of got down here in the bottom. I'll tap X to erase out a little bit. Like that. So this is with the particle brushes. The other one that I thought was kind of cool, if we go back to the brushes here, these are just the normal ones. And if we selected something like this bark, I kind of like this one. You can see this one's actually using an alpha shape on it. If I put this all the way to white like this, my intensity, I can already tell by the indicator here, the flow is down quite low. So I can drag that up and just paint in a little bit now with this. And it gives a kind of nice pattern for like making things feel kind of dirty, things like that, right? So this is going, this is supposed to give the feeling of, we've already got this edge wear and this paint. Like this would be stuff from the world that this got on to this, so it kind of overrides everything. It's kind of like having grease on something. So we're just kind of dirtying this thing up and kind of aging it a little bit. We'll put a little bit in here. Maybe a little there. Okay, so I think that's enough for that. Let's just go ahead. We're going to try to add some dust that might sit on top of this. So I'm going to make a new folder, call this dust, like this. I'll go ahead and take a another material, and I think maybe I'll try this silicone coat. I don't know if they've got anything that says specifically like dust. No, I don't think so. So I think I'm going to go ahead and try this silicone coat. Click and drag it up here and see how that kind of feels. So I think it's kind of good. It's got a lot of roughness to it. So at least as far as this kind of detail that's going on here. So I'll go to the technical parameters and take this. Let's see the normal intensity. I don't know if that's what's really driving that. I don't think so. So let me put that at 1. The height position, like this, or the height range. It's the height range. So I want to drop that down quite a bit. So I'm going to take this height position down to somewhere down in here, like this, and maybe even drive up the roughness this way to make it even less shiny, so it's just very matte kind of feeling. Okay, I'm going to rotate my light around a little bit, shift right click, and on this one I'm going to use a generator. So I'm going to come right here to this and say add generator, but let me hit undo real quick. I like to actually put that on a black mask to mask everything out. Then I like to do the add generator to the mask. And then I'm going to click this and do this one, MIG 3D. I know it says distance. It's hard to see that. But if we do that, we've got controls on this to where we can use what we baked out basically on our texture settings, positional maps. So it does basically gradients from the bottom to the top, front to back, and left to right. So it builds a gradient system that way. And this generator actually uses that information. So we can say position Z, we'll drag this way so you can see we could get the front of it to feel like it's been covered in dust or mud or something like that. If I put that down to 0.5, and then this one we'll try Y, so we can make the top feel like it's more dusted, and that's what I want. We could drive it the other way and it could feel like it's more dusty on the bottom. but I want it to kind of feel like it's kind of more dusty on the top up here, kind of like that. So you can see now that that's sitting over the top of everything else is sitting, this dust is sitting on top of kind of the oil and everything else. So that's what I was kind of talking about, this kind of layering kind of system for things. Now if I go here to this and select it, if we drag this thing down, I can control kind of overall opacity on that whole effect. So I don't want it too intense. We could do something like that there. The other thing is with this, because we got it in a folder, we can actually add a white mask to this. That's the opposite of the black, obviously. But this one will keep everything, and it gives us the opportunity to paint into that white mask. And if we paint into it black, we can hide some things for that. So we got this bark on here, but I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to make the flow really intense and make the size kind of large like this. The other thing we can do, this tangent alignment is set to by default this tangent warp, but we can do camera and we can align this thing basically just by the camera. You can do UV, so it's going to kind of feel like it kind of slides around here, or we can do this tangent warp. So any of them will work, but if you want something that's really kind of like you're stamping down from the camera, you would want to use this in through here. So you can see basically what I'm doing at this point. I'm revealing some of this part under here. So let me see what's going on here with this. So if I turn that off, it's revealing everything down below here on that. We don't want to be painting with any kind of height information or anything else like that. And let me see if this is affecting any, this here is affecting any of the normal intensity. Let me do that and do this height position. So I think that's, I'm not sure why that revealing through was making that pretty intense for that, and I don't want this height position. I guess I'd want it set to 0.5 for what I'm looking for on there. And that didn't kind of get revealed until I hid some of this. So this is basically now at this point I'm taking this and I'm just hiding part of this dust that we've got in through here like that. So it's just a few more additional controls for us on top of just maybe what the computer kind of gave us at that point. And maybe I come back down to this generator and turn it all the way up to 100 at that point, make it a bit, just a little bit stronger. Alright, the last thing we're going to do to this project is paint some of our own custom normal map data into our object. So let's go ahead and make a new folder and we'll call this normal. Like this. We'll go ahead and make a new paint layer and we'll call this normal. Like that, and I'll drag it into the normal area. We can go to our brushes, and again you can paint with anything you want. I'll just choose this maybe default hard like you see here, and what I've done is basically turned off the color, everything basically except for the normal map information. So I turn all this off and I just have this normal area like this. We can navigate over to the texture area and you can see there's these kind of blue maps and there's a lot of information that we can use to paint with. Now a lot of these feel kind of sci-fi-ish and our canon is not, it's not a sci-fi canon or anything. So we do have to find some shapes that kind of work for what we're looking for. So I'm going to try this round shape here. I'm going to click and drag this into the normal map area and you can see now my brush actually changes, the cursor changes to reflect what I'm going to paint with. So I hold down control, right click and drag to the left. I can make this a little bit smaller, and if I paint right here like this, I do not want any kind of size information, no pressure for that, and the flow, I don't want any kind of pressure change for that. So now I can just click and kind of stamp these things down like what you see here, like this. And I could try some other ones too. Let's see what else we can find within here. There's some skin, there's a vent. So again, I have to drag this into the actual brush part, and then I could start to work with this and kind of stamp that down. So it's pretty cool what they have. I was going to see if I could find something that feels like a rivet, and there is one that says window 01. So I could actually take that and use that and stamp that down. So now I could just kind of find opportunities on the model where maybe I could stamp a few extra details into it. And because this is man-made and it's kind of forged out of metal, I don't think we need to be super picky or perfect about things. Like this, and then maybe I'm gonna find some opportunities on the model within through here. So your lighting angle actually plays a pretty big role into what this actually looks like. Maybe I'll stamp down a few parts like this. Right in here. And just do a few more. Maybe I've got some on this thing like this. The other thing is I can get rid of this normal like this. I can turn off normal and I can put on height, and I could be kind of digging into the model if I lower the height information. Now I can make my brush size a little bit smaller, and if you remember, it's possible for us to paint and hold down shift. If we click and then drag out, we can do a straight line. That's pretty large, so I'll hold down control and right click, make it smaller. So I could do something like this. And work my way around. Gonna go from here. Now if I just hold down shift, I can continue to keep adding that line information. Maybe I kind of end it right and through there like that. So this gives you the opportunity to kind of come through and maybe do, even some more design work on your model, which is kind of a cool opportunity. So I'll click here and go here like this. I'm going to keep adding up and through here. So again, I'm just holding shift as I move there, kind of like that. I got something kind of neat for that. Just going to hold down shift and draw maybe something like this. I'm going to click here, go through here. So it's completely up to you how you want to kind of decorate and finish out your design. But I'm going to kind of add a little bit of this edging to mine like this. And I could even do a little more design work and through here. Not sure if I like That'll hit undo for that and get rid of that. Maybe let's do straight line and through here like this. Kind of do some detail right here through there, like that. Like this, and maybe just do a little more in through here. So let me continue that line right here like that. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the symmetry thing here like that, and I think this is looking pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and move my light around the model, and I'll go ahead and save this. I'll do File, Save As, and or Save. Um, Save over the top of what I've got going on there. The last part is this looks pretty good for what we're taking a look at here, but if you want to kind of highlight your work and show off your work, they also added the ability within here to switch your mode from painting to rendering in iRay, which is an NVIDIA technology that's a continuous kind of renderer. Now it does take a little bit of time for it to switch over to this other renderer. But you can see you can do this kind of max samples or max time. It'll keep making the image look better and better as time goes on, but it'll hit this max time, and you might see some noise in the image. If you want it to look better, you can just increase the max time to, let's say, like 60 for 60 seconds or something like that, and we'll keep upping the quality level that we've got here. Now there's some other things in here that we can do. So we've got our environment exposure, this dome. You can change some of that stuff. I don't like to see this background information, so I'll just use a clear color like this, and I can change this. I'll probably make it darker and through here, so it just kind of stands out a little bit more for me. Again, if you want to move your light source, you can hold down Shift and right click, and you can rotate the light around. But I think that was looking pretty good where it was at, like this. If you want to override kind of the resolution of what's going on in the viewport, they do have some things for that. Let's see, it's right here in this override viewport resolution. So if you want to render it even larger, you can change the numbers within here and render it even larger than what you see in this area. So looks like we're getting close to this max samples. You can see it's got the iterations, the rendering time, and so we haven't quite hit that full quality bar. But at any point, whenever you're ready, if you're happy with the quality of it or it finishes up, you can actually save out the render and save that out. So you can just go ahead and click that and save your render, and you're able to open it into a program like Photoshop or something else like that. So let's just go ahead, and this looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and say save render, and we can do all kinds of different file formats. So I'm just going to save it to the desktop real quick and do iRay render 01. And I guess to save it out as the type that you want, you just type in what it is. So I'll just type in .tga. Let's see if that works. I'll hit save like that. Let's go to Photoshop, and let's go ahead and say open. I'm going to go to the desktop real quick, and then I save this as iRay render target file, and so there you are. I think with the target file, it actually spits out an alpha channel for you, so you can remove the background if you want. You can go to layers, double click on it, hit OK, go to channels. Actually, I'm going to duplicate this real quick just so I got one copy of what I had before. Go to channels, hold down control, select that, and go back to your layers. I can inverse it, control shift I, and I can just hit backspace and get that out of there. And at that point I could make my own kind of solid color layer and make it whatever kind of color I wanted back behind this. And now I've got my renderer, or my render, and it's actually separated out from things. So could be a nice way of, if you did multiple renders and you want to display them all on one page, you could select them like this, set up a page, whatever your color is, kind of get things, right here. So maybe you're doing like 4 up or something. I could erase this thing out. Got into the image a little too much. Let's go like this here. And again, so you could do multiple images on one page and display the work and show it off very, very nicely. Yep. So I think that's a pretty good introduction into the different ways that you can kind of use Painter. I know we're just kind of touching the surface and we didn't even get into smart materials and things like that, smart mask. So this program has got more depth to it, but this is going to get you started with the program, get you to where you understand how you can start to paint your own kind of materials and things like that, and come up with your own interesting designs.